Hey guys, yes, this is the review for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. It is a long one. I apologize. I got carried away talking about the game and the world and the story, which I loved so much. I'm probably going to have to do a separate video on the world building alone because clearly I have a lot to say about it. But I am adding timestamps to the video so you can just jump around to wherever you want. I also do want to say I apologize. While playing the game, I was focused on playing the game, so sometimes the captures I got don't exactly match up to exactly what I'm talking about. Again, I do apologize for that. But thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you like this game just as much as I do, and we can talk about it. Peace.
So many months at Foltest Court, yet you still haven't mastered the basics of etiquette.
Know what they say? Can't teach an old wolf new tricks. Take it you didn't summon me to reminisce about the good old days, so...
Silence. You will find her and bring her to me.
Are you sure? Ciri left. Went far away.
Do you believe I drag you here in the middle of a war to discuss a rumor?
I think anyone can be wrong. Even an emperor.
I had forgotten how insolent you can be.
Okay, that is just a small bit of the drama and adventure that awaits you in this amazingly crafted world from the folks over at CD Projekt Red. Guys and gals, it is finally time. I have sunk 76 hours into The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, and I am ready to share all my thoughts about it. The good, and the good. Notice how I didn't say bad, because there is not that much bad about it. So originally released back in 2015 for PC and the last generation of consoles, PS4 and Xbox One. I originally had it for PC, but ran into slight performance issues when playing at 4K and trying to record my gameplay. For my techies out there, the system I was running had a 6th generation Intel i7 processor, 6600U to be specific, and an NVIDIA 980 running in it, the graphics card. So, I mean, it wasn't terrible, especially for back then, but I did have some noticeable lag and more than a couple freezes when I tried to record the gameplay, as I said. So, anyway, I eventually ended up getting it for the PS4 Pro, and that is the gameplay you will be seeing all throughout this video. And I am very happy to report that in my experience, it lived up to all the hype I was hearing. What hype, you may ask? Well, this game was a massive success and remains one to this day, selling over 40 million copies, making it one of the best-selling video games of all time. I've heard it called Game of the Year, but honestly, this is a game of the decade. Decade, guys. Not since Skyrim have I sunk so many hours so quickly getting lost in a world that I loved every minute of. Okay, so a bit of background before we get into the gushing. First off, if you aren't familiar with these games, they are not based on the wonderful Netflix series you might have heard of that stars that walking pile of handsome named Henry Cavill. That series is actually an adaptation of the source material, a series of short stories and novels written by Polish fantasy writer Andrzej Sapkowski. I really hope I'm saying his name correctly. These novels center around Geralt of Rivia, who is a witcher. What's a witcher? Well, it's a human who has undergone mutation to become something not quite so human, and now has special knowledge and abilities needed to fight monsters that plague their land. Throughout the novels, we follow Geralt as he meets his friends, lovers, enemies, and more, while hunting monsters for coin with his fellow witchers.
Saving people, hunting things. The family business.
These video games, however, are a completely original story taking place after Sapkowski, gosh, why can't I say that right? After Sapkowski's final Witcher novel, with Geralt, who seemingly died in the last novel, suddenly reemerging in the world without most of his memories. He had amnesia. So even if you begin The Witcher 1, you might be a little bit lost in that story if you don't have any background knowledge from the books. And honestly, you should read them. They're fantastic. I might have to do a whole separate review on the novels alone. Now, even saying all that, as a player of the video games myself, I have to admit, I didn't play the original Witcher game. Not then, not now. I had to get the details on that game by watching cutscenes on the internet. My first actual foray as a player was the second game, titled Assassin of Kings, which picks up very soon after the events of the first game. About 2 hours in playing Assassin of Kings, I realized I had very little idea what was going on. The game itself had events happening, and in a bubble, you understood like the objective you had to get done. But honestly, you can't understand or appreciate the game without knowing the various characters and relationships behind it all. It's like watching the Battle of Blackwater in Game of Thrones or the Battle of Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings without knowing any of the characters. Definitely a fun watch, but it's so much better if you have the background there. But anyway, just circling back to that second game, I did like it, didn't love it as a game. Not being able to jump was practically a deal breaker, people. It's probably what I get for playing it so late. But what I did really like about it was the story. So much so that it made me invest time in reading about the major events and characters and the timeline and big bad monsters that Witchers like Geralt had to fight. I did all of this so that by the time I popped in the disc for Wild Hunt, I'd be all caught up and ready to go. And I was still kind of lost, to be honest, but in a good way. So let's get into all things Witcher 3 and hopefully explain why I think this is the best game made to date. Alright, so in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, you are again playing as Geralt of Rivia, the title Witcher. This takes place about 10 years after the current spot in the Netflix series, if you're watching that, and you're navigating a world at war. So the main story here is that Geralt and his longtime lover Yennefer, making her in-game debut, have been commissioned by Emperor Emir var Emreis of Nilfgaard to find the child Ciri and bring her home before the Wild Hunt catches her. The Wild Hunt, teased in prior games, are a mythical band of raiders who ride horses through the sky and are thought to be invincible and unstoppable. They're basically the fantasy boogeymen. A lot of people didn't think they existed until they realized that they did. And if the Wild Hunt is after you, your best solution is to just run. Run away. Guys and gals, this is probably as close to a perfect game as I've played in a very long time. Mass Effect 2 included. Though I know that one paragraph of a statement I just made had a lot of history behind it, and honestly, to explain it all in good detail would fill 8 books worth of lore, right? But please know you are not expected to read these books before you play. I know I didn't. But as I said earlier, I think it's definitely worth the time to read a quick Wikipedia article on certain things that you hear come up more than once. And characters it seems that Geralt has some sort of complicated history with when he's talking to them. So that way things like conjunction of spheres, doing this in one take, conjunction of spheres, which explains how monsters came to be here, and the children of the Elder Blood, and Geralt's relationship with Yennefer and so many other sorceresses, and the Wild Hunt itself, and even Emperor Emir's relationship with Ciri aren't totally foreign. And real quick, Emperor Emir himself, I opened this video with a clip of him. I think he is the coolest. Do you know what his nickname is? They call him actually, you know what? Let Yennefer say it.
Someone who doesn't like to be kept waiting. Emperor Emir var Emreis. Or, to those on more intimate terms with him, the white flame dancing on the graves of his foes.
Yeah, I just think that's so epic, man. That is a name. Okay, so we're going to start with what I did not like about this game, because it's only 2.25 things, to be honest. The first thing I didn't like is the constant backtracking. The game has a fast travel system, but dudes and dudettes, you visit the same places a lot. Totally different type of game, but same issue for those who played Devil May Cry 4. You may remember how you played through areas as Nero and fought bosses in each area, and then literally played through the same areas and fought the same bosses when you were Dante. Now, this isn't that level of bad, but it's close in terms of having to constantly go back to the same area to talk to the same person or fight the same person over and over. Now, that kind of actually feeds into my second dislike. And I should actually mention that both of these dislikes are things that happen within the first half, or maybe little over half of the game. So it's not like it continues the entire way. But my second dislike is the way which the game progresses. So, in hunting for Ciri, obviously, you can't just go find her in the first mission, right? The game has you talk to people who may have seen her. That's fine, but it's almost like the creators didn't know how to craft a world-exploring adventure without making it entirely a series of fetch quests. For example, a quest might go like this. A baron who saw Ciri will only tell you what he knows if you help him collect a debt. The person who owes him the debt will only give it to you if you kill a monster. The person who has the herb or potion you need to kill the monster will only make it for you if you collect the ingredients he wants. The area with the ingredients that you need is only known by a person who will help you when you find her husband. Do you see what I'm getting at? It actually got to a point where I was doing something and I was so far down the rabbit hole, I actually had to trace back to my quest log, go in my quest log to trace back to the main objective to understand why I was doing what I was doing. And then when you finally do make it back to the original person who had the information you wanted all along, he'll tell you a third or half of the story before stopping and making you go on another fetch quest. This actually got quite annoying early on because the story is so enamoring. And now it's been interrupted because some dummy wants me to go fight some three-titted monster for him. And now I'm going to kind of contradict myself a little bit. You see, it's interesting because while actually playing the game, it is very, very fun. Doing things in game with the gameplay. But you have some resentment because what you're doing seems more like a menial errand rather than important to the game itself. But fortunately, like I said, the entire game is not like this. And once you progress far enough, things like these fetch quests happen less and less, though they do still happen. Okay, and then the last thing, and I barely want to mention this because they're just some graphical and technical mishaps I came across. Once I started on the PS4 Pro, I had no crashes. None. In 76 hours of gameplay. That is remarkable for a game this size. But there were a few instances of texture pop in certain scenes when it had it rendered properly. Geralt's hair would weirdly change color sometimes. I don't know what that was about. My map, it would sometimes point me up when the objective was down. But what really ticked me off and actually even made me add this here is the water mechanics. When you are in water, this mofo will not jump on land. I don't know why it's so hard, but there are several times I actually yelled out loud because he wouldn't just walk or climb onto a boat or land that was a half inch above sea level. It led to many extended play sessions where I actually had to swim around to find a piece of land this spoiled Witcher gleamed worthy to hop out of the water onto. It got me killed one time, which really made me mad. So just something to point out, I didn't like that. Now, obviously, that last one was one that was more of annoyance. And none of these were honestly game breakers, but they were enough that I noticed. Okay, so let's get to what I loved. So the first thing we need to talk about is the world. More than any other video game I've played, the world of The Witcher 3 actually feels alive and lived in. Like I said earlier, you're basically dropped into a world and setting that has clearly existed before you as the player entered. What I mean by that is the character of Geralt knows what's going on, more or less. But even if you played the first two Witcher games, you're still only going to be playing catch-up with the story in this game. You begin the game hunting for Yennefer, your lost love, who again was never seen in the games prior to this. So even conversations that Geralt and his companion Vesemir are having at this time early in the game feel like events that happened in the past that you should have seen, but you didn't if your only investment in the lore is strictly to the games. During these beginning missions, you as the player find out the setting you're in, which is a world at war with the southern empire of Nilfgaard led by Emperor Emhyr invading the northern realms where you are. Only one of the kings of these northern realms remains alive, and that is King Radovid, who is fighting back Emhyr with everything he can. And he's kind of a crazy person. We don't like him. Now, all of this stuff you learn, you're not really told or shown through cutscenes, right? Like, this is stuff you learn as you really just walk around the world and talk to people. Now, that would annoy me, like I said. In other games, I would be kind of irritated not knowing what's going on when I'm starting the game and feeling like there's a whole story that I don't understand. But this game is different. Never has a game made me want to engage with NPCs so much. It really goes to show how well CD Projekt Red crafted this world. It feels like each person in each village is real and has something they are dealing with that you can rap to them about. And as you talk to these people in villages and cities and on the road is how you get to understand what's going on in the world and why and how it's impacting their lives and the lives of their city. It's really remarkable how engaging this is. For comparison, I do want to bring up another game I recently played, and that is The Ghost of Tsushima. It's a totally different feel from The Witcher 3. And while I love The Ghost of Tsushima and think everyone should play it, it's very much like a lot of the other RPGs, where outside of the main mission, there isn't really much to actually see in the world. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a lot to do, like through exploration, but it means that when you're riding around on your horse, you're basically alone in the world. There aren't people you see just, walking around, living their lives and doing things. You're really just there going through fields, admiring the views. Now, you might come across some NPCs spread throughout the land who are there to give you some sort of side mission, but outside of the main mission in that world, you're not really going to have meaningful interactions, and you're just going to have enemy encounters and explore for gear. Now, contrast that to the Wild Hunt, which has everything I just mentioned in abundance, but also has scenes of the black armored Nilfgaard soldiers just walking around the countryside as if it's their own land and getting dirty looks from northerners, or walking through a forest to see humans out on their own hunt for a monster, walking through town and hearing villagers discuss a plague that's sweeping the land, or walking through a city and seeing humans ganging up on a non-human, or religious zealots screaming about witches on a pulpit. And with all these things I'm mentioning, I'm not in mission, nor do I actually have to interact with any of them. It's just stuff that's happening in the world around me. And it makes me feel like, I'm walking around in a town in real life with real people. If the town were 1,000 years ago. You can, of course, choose to interact with all these people, and you honestly might, like I did. But there's just so much to do in the world outside of hunting Ciri for the main storyline or killing monsters. You can go to a bookstore and just read about the past for hours to understand why Ciri is important and what we know of the Wild Hunt and major events of the past, like the destruction of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers. You can walk around towns and villages and ask people how the war has impacted the North, which helps you learn where and where not to go. You can stumble across non-humans and ask how King Radovid's policies have impacted them. You can interact with townsfolk and learn about their specific monster threats and actually see how that impacts that town over time. You can go talk to other witchers and herbalists to learn how to craft useful potions if you want. You can take odd jobs from town's bulletin boards. You can even go to a brothel if you want. Or if you prefer, hook up with one of the many hot sorceresses that you know, and then have some pillow talk. You even have time to take in a show at Dandelion Spot if you want.
night to which we both atone. You flee, my dream come the morning.
So hopefully you've caught on to the fact that there's a lot of the past and present to learn about in this world. And I know, trust me, I know, it can seem like it's overwhelming or like it might be irritating to try to get all this knowledge. But because there are so many interesting ways for you to learn, I actually came to appreciate being in this world that was already established and then catching myself up rather than being fed massive loads of exposition. Because to receive it in that fashion, honestly, like through cutscenes or something, I feel like that would detract from the game. So clearly I'm a fan of the lore and had tons of fun discovering it. I mean, every conversation I had with Emperor Emhyr had me doing a Google search about his past with Geralt. But if you're here more so for the monster slaying action, is the game actually fun? I'm happy to say the answer is a resounding yes. Which leads to the next thing I love about the game, the actual witchering, if that's a word. So I did mention earlier that the actual vehicle of getting you into situations where you put your witcher skills to the test is a little annoying for about the first half of the game. But even so, while you're actually being a witcher, you will have tons of fun. The game ain't easy. Please don't think that you are Kratos or Jin Sakai, or hell, even Ratchet. If you run into a situation just slashing and button mashing, you're gonna die. You're gonna die a lot. Even on normal, I found myself many times facing situations where I had to run away and retreat. One, to keep the mission going, but also to avoid those long load times. But nah, man, seriously. Like in most games, like the ones I just mentioned, I have to be trying really hard or being really reckless to die outside of a boss battle on normal mode. In the Wild Hunt, it is established very early on that you are not typical video game strong. To be totally objective, though, you will find that fighting human enemies, like bandits or royal guards in this game, it's pretty standard. Even if you happen to wander into an encampment with soldiers slightly above your current level, you should be okay on normal mode. But what I mean when I say it's hard is all about the monsters. And we're talking just regular run-of-the-mill enemies, not even bosses. For example, a very common enemy in this game are called drowners. Drowners are like the Magikarp of this game. They're effing everywhere. You will meet them when you are level 2, and you will meet them when you are level 40. They are the first monsters I met when I was around level 3 or so. And, I'm thinking, okay, common enemy. I remember them from The Witcher 2. I can make quick work of them. No, I was wrong. I ran up to slash them, but they ganged up on me and killed me. At level 3. I'm not sure I was even an hour into the game yet. So as a Witcher, you have access to special abilities called signs that let you draw on magic, such as fire, mind control, and a sort of force push, to name a few. In addition, you have access to potions, herbs, mutagens, silver swords, steel swords, specialty bombs, runes, and the all-important bestiary. You're gonna need all of this. I love that this game makes you work for every kill, even in its normal mode. You're gonna have to read up on monsters in your bestiary to learn their weaknesses, and then craft weapons and potions to combat them. You have to make sure you have the correct magic equipped as well. In most games, I'm all about the offensive. So naturally, I would have my fire magic going to supplement my sword slashes. But like I said, outside of human battles, that ain't gonna work. Like, if you're going after a big hunt in this game, you're gonna want to prepare the battlefield with traps and use magic that supplements those traps to hold your monster in place. Like if you're fighting a monster that loves to strike swiftly, for example, you're going to need to equip the magic sign that gives you a special shield to absorb those blows. You're going to have to get your swords ready with oils that are specially meant to combat that particular foe. Sometimes you have to decide whether to drink a potion that will hurt you over time, but hopefully give you an advantage to end the fight quickly. Every monster is going to require some sort of strategy. Just because you have a sword specially meant for monsters doesn't mean it's always the best way. The number of slashes I use with my sword varies greatly between a vampire and an echidna, for example. Oh, and also you don't have a health bar that just recovers automatically outside of battle. You actually need to use resources like a potion or food, and also rest to gain your health back. The game ain't pulling its punches. Now, the last thing I really want to mention about the gameplay and give it credit for is the controls. They are tight and excellent. Now, outside of the water that I hated, Geralt pretty much acts how I need him to in the time I need him to. When I need him to dodge left, he does. When I need him to parry, he does. When I need him to cast a sign, he does. And when I need a jump, he does it as I press the button. There's no lag or weird glitches that ever came up, which is something I had to note because I did get frustrated with it when I played the second game, Assassin of Kings, back on the Xbox 360. They also make switching your weapons and going through your inventory a breeze so it doesn't really disrupt your gameplay experience while in combat. All right, so yeah, I know this is running long, but just to recap the main points. The Witcher 3 has a very detailed world with a story and characters you will learn to love and not want to leave. I want to do an entire video on the world crafting alone because all the lore and detail they managed to fit in this game, it's nothing short of astonishing. I didn't even get to the Wild Hunt itself and how they impact your environment whenever they arrive. Look, here's all you really need to know about the craftsmanship of this game. They have a mission involving a character that ends with the character cursing herself so she will die in 7 years. Somebody actually clocked their system 7 years forward, and that character really just dropped dead in the game. Come on, that is just magnificent. And even if all you really want is just a fun and challenging RPG, just for escapism, you'll be hard-pressed to find one better than this. I mean, graphically and certainly technically, it still lives up to the best of the genre. You will not be disappointed. So before I get out of here, it would be a crime not to mention my third favorite thing in this game, and that is GWENT. If you know, you know. If you don't know, you should know. GWENT is a card game within the game, and I am obsessed. At least, and I mean least, 11 hours of my gameplay were spent just challenging people to this addicting game. I felt like Kaiba the way I was hunting for cards to make my perfect decks. There were days when I actually turned on the PlayStation knowing full well I was not going to complete a single story or side mission and only planned to challenge innkeepers to GWENT. I don't know what it is, but something about it is it's so enticing. I would buy this game separately outside of The Witcher, no doubt. When you build a deck you like, you just have to try it out against the strongest opponents you can find. Like, I had a Northern Realms deck. That's the deck you start off with. And I built that deck through sweat and tears. I got mine perfect. But then, I started getting cards for a Scoia'tael deck. The Scoia'tael are like elves. And I got that to a place where I was comfortable with it running as my main. So all the best people I had challenged before, I went back and I challenged again with my new deck just to see how I would fare. Honestly, at the price the game is at now, I'm not lying, GWENT would be worth just buying the game alone. So yeah, guys and gals, I gotta say, I'm a little salty I wasn't informed about this earlier. We are cool on Twitter and the gram talking anime and movies and video games. How did this not come up? If I had to give a rating, this would be beyond awesome. I will reiterate, CD Projekt Red's The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is the best game of the last decade. All right, thanks so much for watching and listening to my voice. Now, let me know what your favorite moments, characters, storylines, or anything are from the world of The Witcher 3 down in the comments. Let's talk about it.